More important than the CEO. More important than the CEO. Does that exist? More important than the co-founder. More important than the MD, managing director. More important than anyone. Now, how can I say that? Who is more important than the person running the company? Well, if this function fails, it doesn't matter what the CEO does. He's failed. Here we go. The bookkeeper, your finance guy, whatever you want to call them, the finance department in a small company, it'll be the bookkeeper. They're more important than the CEO, because if they fail, the company will fail. Let me explain. And the first thing is, it's easy in a small company that grows rapidly for this function to not keep up, to not keep pace, and to not get adequate resource. You start with one person on like half a day or something processing invoices, and then you grow tenfold and that person still comes in for a half day processing invoices. See the disparity. FTX is a prime example. FTX finance function led to their complete and utter collapse. $1 billion company. So let's go through it. More important than the CEO, it's the bookkeeper, it's the finance guy, finance girl. They need a defined role. What is your expectation of the bookkeeper? For example, they need to come in weekly, every day. You can have a firm, you can have an individual. I have no preference. We always went for an individual who came into the office and did the work. And then the more busy you are, the more days they need to come in. And if that person can't give you more days, you need to get rid of them and move to either someone else who has the time, or then a firm who'll do it for you. It's up to the CEO, let's call the CEO, whoever's running the company, to decide what their defined role is. And you both need to be very clear. So for example, on a weekly basis, you want all invoices put into your accounting system, whether it be Sage, Xero, QuickBooks. I can't think of any others on the top of my head. I'm missing one. Sage, Xero, QuickBooks. There's another one. You want, if you've got payroll, obviously that's going to be done in a timely manner. You're going to want to know, say every week, you're going to say to the guy, I want to know who owes me money and who do I know owe money. So that it's like a aged debtors report and an aged creditors report. You're like, I want that printed out every week and I want it on my desk or sent to me in email. You're going to want the bank reconciled each week, let's say. This would be on a small company. On a big company, you probably want it done daily. You're going to perhaps every month want a profit and loss report. You're going to want a balance sheet, maybe emailed to you, maybe printed. You're going to want to know anything that has gone over 90 days, any queries in the accounts that haven't been accounted for. The trouble with accounting, we found, bookkeeping, is that bookkeepers just leave stuff. They leave balances. And so me, as an example, I would get a statement in from a supplier. I'd pay the entire balance. So in my mind, our account is zero. If I paid the balance and I haven't done any other orders since and there's no outstanding invoices, our account is zero. Yet when you check with the bookkeeper, their carry forward balance is $4,000. Well, hang on. When I say I've paid off the balance, you need to say to me, that account isn't zero. And we need to go back, because once you're a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line and that account is zero, there's a discrepancy, there's a mistake. And weirdly, but every single bookkeeper, and we've had 5, every single one just lets these carry forward balances exist. It's really bizarre, because to me that's just not acceptable. So define what your expectations are. You'll have a PayPal account that needs to be reconciled, and I tell you, PayPal is a complete nightmare. They'll backdate amendments in historical transactions where you've even filed a VAT return. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. They shouldn't do it, but they do, because you've reconciled to March 31st, and then suddenly they'll amend a transaction in January. It just shouldn't be allowed. So I don't know how PayPal get away with it. So it's also not that easy, but you'll have lots of income from various sources. I would really recommend that your accounts is very organized. If you have an income stream or an outbound stream, have its own accounting code for each one. Don't just bulk it all in, because when you come to unravel it, and you will, if you haven't set up a code for each one, it's just one big mess, one big party mess. One of the hardest, when you're a small business and you're operating with other small businesses or individuals, it's easy to reconcile, company to company. Well, I say that, but there's always these carry forward balances, which blew my mind. When you're dealing with a big company, it is an absolute shit show. So, for example, we had accounts with Harrods and Boots and Hut Group, and these are big companies in the UK. They would just add on discounts to their own to your invoices. They would add a discount to your invoice for themselves. They would not pay some of the invoice just because. They would rebate themselves for unagreed amounts. It's really difficult to stay on top of those accounts. And you need to over-resource. I've said this in a previous video. You need to over-resource your bookkeeping function, because this stuff, once it gets aged, it's really hard to fix. So it was definitely one of our mistakes of not over-resourcing the bookkeeping function. Or maybe I'm just pedantic, and maybe I just wanted everything to equal zero because it's maths and it should. But you definitely need someone who's going to drill into these accounts and be on top of them, because you cannot rely, this is like the second most important thing I've said, you cannot rely on that company getting their accounts correct. We notoriously, for 10 years, saw the price we were paying on items to be incorrect. We saw the discount applied for bulk purchases done incorrectly. We saw VAT amounts incorrect. We saw them saying they're delivered items, but it not being on the delivery note. So it would be invoiced for... So for me, when you ship something, in my mind, it should be, oh, well, those items have been shipped. So there's the invoice raised, one for one, and there's the payment in, and everything should tie up. But it didn't happen. There's your dispatch note, your delivery note. The invoice showed different items at different prices with no discounts. So how could their system even tie up? And it didn't. That was the amazing thing. These fairly big suppliers, not even their system tied up. So, and it was up to you. And it's horrible because you feel like it's such a waste of time. You have to check not just the delivery note, that is accurate to what came in, but that the invoice matches the delivery note. It's really mundane, it's really boring, but it's so essential because we saw time and time again the suppliers making these errors. And I didn't think it'd be possible because I thought it was system driven. And it seems like, it's hard to say this, but it seems like everyone is trying to scam everyone else. So the finance function of these companies, someone said to them, just like change the trade price. up like 10%, see if they notice, and put it through. And if you don't notice, you pay the wrong price and you'll be out of business. So you've got that conflict with your suppliers to be sharper than them. And I'll tell you, there'll be mistakes continually, all the time. So define your guy's role. Tell him the important parts that need to be checked. Cross-check. Now that is, within your company, you cannot have someone capable of fixing their own mistakes. So what do I mean? Say you're raising invoices. That cannot be the bookkeeper, because then if, say, you raise an invoice incorrectly, you do 10 whatevers, and you only ship 5, this person will then hide their mistake. Or they'll say you ship 10, but you only invoice 5. They'll just hide their mistake. The temptation is too high. There's no way they'll correct it. And again, you have to have the invoice raiser and the bookkeeper as 2 different people. Have to. Or just someone that's a significant shareholder and it's within their interest to spot the mistakes. As soon as it's just someone paid by the hour, they will not correct themselves. Third item that is so critical. Do not have the person raising the invoices be the bookkeeper. They need to be separate individuals. Reporting. The bookkeeper's function is to allow you to run timely reports, P&Ls, VAT reports, balance sheets, who owes who. This is, there's fancy words to describe these, but I'm like, who do I owe and who owes me? So age creditors, age debtors, all the fancy terms. It's just, I'd just like to keep it in English. And maybe you have an expectation of when you want to see these reports, and that guy's role gives you that information. For us, when you're a e-commerce, you're paying people, your suppliers, because you'll have 30-day terms or 60-day terms. So cash flow is less of a problem if you're paying people, because you just don't pay them. You're receiving the customer money, and then you pay your suppliers. Obviously, if you have a cash flow issue, you're going to delay your payments to your suppliers. Your suppliers, on the other hand, so we had this as one of our companies, that was always owed money by the retailer. They have a cash flow problem because it's be retailers like me that would drag my feet on paying. Oh yeah, we've paid, checks in the post. We'll do it on our next payment run. I mean, it's all nonsense. You can log into your bank right now, make a payment, and it'll be there in 2 minutes. So all this nonsense about, we'll do it on our next payment run. I mean, it's nonsense. So just think, are you a payer or are you a receiver? And if you're a retail business, you're a payer. So cash flow will be less of a problem than if you're the manufacturer trying to get payments off people like me, your retailers. But you can work with your bookkeeper to keep your cash flow in good order. And that's basically being on top of those who owe you. And I would never, one thing to be really careful of, I saw it, my business partner who ran the side that always needed payment, they would say things like, oh, it's okay, they're Harrods. They're even worse at paying. They have, they're just as likely to go bust as you are. You're probably less likely to go bust. So when they have 30-day terms, or when you give them terms of credit, yes, they expect 30 days or 60 days, but the amount you give them is actually the amount you can handle not receiving. They might be good for it, but it's actually the amount you need to operate. And one of the companies we dealt with, everything was pro forma. You want the goods, you pay for it, and then we'll ship it. And for 10 years, they were pro forma. So don't be afraid when you're starting up to work on a pro forma basis. If you don't know what pro forma is, like I was saying, we would order goods from a supplier. They would send us a pro forma invoice. We would pay the pro forma, and then they would ship it. For everyone else, we would order, they would ship, and then they would invoice us, not pro forma invoice. They would invoice us on dispatch, and we would owe that money to be paid within 30 days. So cash flow is key, and you can work with your bookkeeper to make sure you have enough. Because if you're someone bringing in goods to go to retailers, you'll at some point need to pay your suppliers for their goods and your staff and so on. We set up a retail arm of our website, and what I noticed was the guy who set up the shop had no way enough money. So he had something like 20,000. I mean, it was beyond ridiculous. And he like assured me that would be enough to operate a retail business. And because the risk wasn't with me, it was with him. I was like, okay, give it your shot. But it's nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. It's a bit like when you hear all these finance gurus, and they talk about having an emergency fund, like 6 months of your salary, you know, in a savings account, blah, blah, blah. It's hard to attach numbers because it depends on your industry and all this stuff. But you need as much cash as possible. And it goes back to the last video on being frugal. Don't spend unless you absolutely have to on, you know, office stuff, making, you know, people fancy lunches, microwaves, you know, the toll of a list of 10 £1.50s doesn't equal £15. It equals like $2,000. It always amazes me, the sum of small numbers. And if you don't know what I mean, you know, download your bank statement for the last 2 months and just like eyeball it, guess how much that money is, and then sum it in actual figures. And you'll be amazed at how your little, like coffee here, coffee there, lunch, you know, how those small numbers add up. But anyway, I'm digressing. I apologize. So, point to raise, you're probably wondering, why are you talking about a bookkeeper and not an accountant? For most businesses, the accountant just comes in at the end of the year when you want to submit all your numbers to your government. In the UK, it's the HMRC. In the US, I guess it's the IRS. The accountant handles that side. Your day-to-day finances are handled by your bookkeeper or your finance department. Which accountant package to use? The one I would heavily suggest you don't use is QuickBooks. I've heard good things about Sage and good things about Xero. This is just personal experience, and this is for entertainment only. One thing about your bookkeeper and your accountant, well, not your accountant so much, the bookkeeper, check what they do. Every now and again, what are you doing? Because every now and again, you will find that they'll be doing weird stuff. We had a bookkeeper at one point that was entering every line of every invoice. And I was like, what are you doing? And he said, oh, you know, every line of every invoice. He's like, oh, I did the last place. I was like, okay. Just the totals at the bottom. We don't need every line of every invoice. And he was quite disturbed that we didn't need every line of every invoice. And I was quite disturbed that he thought we did, because you'd need, in a big company, could you imagine it? You'd need 1,000 people working all hours of every day to fill in every line of every invoice. You just need the bottom two numbers, that number and the total. So just leading on to that, when you're defining the role, you're going to kind of bore them, because you're going to go, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? Just make it out like it's for my understanding. I'm not very finance savvy. I want to understand, blah, 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 blah. Get your bookkeeper to handle in each invoice, each bit of paper. This sounds backwards, but we learned this mistake several times. The bookkeeper needs to handle each invoice. Simple things like some suppliers would send an invoice and then a second one underneath. And if you have an automated system, it just goes to the bottom and finds and misses the first one. So, packages like Receipt Bank would always make that mistake. Other things on invoices, they would spot, say, the name was wrong, the amounts were wrong, the discount applied was wrong. It's really important that they're handled by a person and not a machine. At least we found that. I know people will argue that AI should spot all this stuff, but we just didn't. And it's too important a function to get wrong. And in most businesses, there's enough invoices. Sorry, when you're a really big company, the invoice, just the numbers get bigger. And so they can be handled on a one-to-one basis by a person, not just put through some AI system. Strongly recommend that you get your accountant, even if they're of an age, to work from the cloud. So all your invoices into a folder. He will go through each invoice in the folder into a posted folder and have it super organized. And that'll be for that month. And then next month, another folder and so on. And you'll save down all your information in monthly folders or weekly folders or daily folders, depending on how many bits of paper you have. And important, they're named so that this, your Dropbox can be easily searched, or your Google Drive, or wherever you're going to save them. And just have everything in there. So have no paper records if you operate a cloud system. And just don't even consider doing a paper system. Just everything in the cloud. Scan it, make it a PDF, or make it just a JPEG, save it down. Bookkeeper goes in there and files each one in by hand. Really important. Last thing, a lot of people seem to have their mother, their other half, their granny's aunt as their bookkeeper. Unless you're the smallest industry ever, it's got to be a professional. So you need a professional bookkeeper, because not only why? Because they're probably one step down from being an accountant, a qualified accountant. And so a decent bookkeeper will work for many companies, or a bookkeeping firm will work for many companies and learn things from all the other companies they work for that should then come in and work for you. If you just have your granny's aunt doing your books, they're not a professional. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have the qualifications. They don't know the correct salaries, the correct way to treat dividends, the correct way to treat... you went out to lunch and you want to put it against expenses, but it was just you and a friend. You can't put that in. That's not a business lunch. However you want to paint it, it's not. They'll know how to treat things in terms of what can be expensed and what can't be. They'll know how to treat VAT. They'll know all the really critical things that you don't want to get wrong. I just strongly recommend that you treat this person more important than the CEO. Your bookkeeper needs to be better than you, not your granny's aunt. That's it.